Welcome to the Dude-Eronomy podcast, providing a male-centered, biblical, and relatable conversation about theology, thoughts, opinions on either topical or current events. Now, let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of the Dude-Eronomy podcast. My name is Kurt.
And I'm Andrew. Welcome back.
Yeah, this is our welcome back episode. We've been traveling, crisscrossing the globe, and it's time that we got back and sort of got into a rhythm of doing the podcast again. And we recorded a couple interviews that I hope people enjoy. I know that it was nice for me to have my friends on, obviously, but to have Stephen on and chat about community. And I shared that message that Stephen had with our community group that just started up again. And I think it's just so poignant for Stephen to say, to treat community not like a restaurant, but where you get served, but where you are hosting someone, and that it's not just a place for you to sort of check out or, you know, maybe do if your schedule allows it or if you're feeling up for it, that community is really what the church is. The church is the community. So it's not just an hour and a half or 2 hours on a Sunday. So I really enjoyed that episode. If you guys go back and listen to that, I think that was a really, really good episode. And especially Stephen, sort of the second half, talking about community and the importance of it.
I mean, it's the whole posture that Jesus came to serve, but not, be served. And I think so much we view church a lot in the West and America in particular as like a buffet, pick what we want, rather than, going into it with the mindset that God's putting people providentially, God's molding things behind the scenes to put people in our lives for a reason. And the people in your community group are important to him and they should be important to us. And so going into it with how does God want me to be used in this space, incredibly quite different from the way that a lot of people think about it,
You're right. The self-sacrificial leader, the servant leadership that Jesus portrayed is not, I mean, especially we're in election cycle right now, that's not always the attitude of politicians. And we get very jaded with politicians because they don't have a servant mindset, even though they're elected and employed by us. And so we, right. And I think it's kind of an interesting catch-22, not to get into politics, but it's just an interesting catch-22 because I always think like I would love to run for office, not just to say like, oh, I have power, but because I want to give that power away. Like I don't want, like I more small government and whatnot. And that's more of a philosophical issue, but I always think that it's so much better to have leaders that don't want to be leaders. And it's such an interesting, there's this catch-22 of, well, I want good, solid, Christian people to be leading, but at the same time, the people that want to be leading are the people that we don't want. So it's, and the people that don't want to lead obviously aren't usually running for political office. So it's really difficult and hard, but yeah, that servant leadership and being part of community and selfless is not something that, especially in our culture, comes very easily to people.
Right. and especially seeing the average churchgoer yourself as a person in ministry. A lot of times like, oh, I do my tithing, I give to my church or this nonprofit so they can do all the work. But the Lord lives in each of our hearts if we've given our lives to Christ, and he wants to work through each one of us. And it's that whole aspect of spirit-led life that is easier said than done, but once you figure it out, it's really freeing and really fun.
Absolutely. And speaking of fun, we have been, I mean, I know you've been working, but I also know that the trips that you go on are rewarding and in their own
Hmm.
right. So for the last month or so, what have you been up to? This is just kind of what we're doing this episode. We're just going to kind of catch up, talk about how God was moving in our trips and our, I mean, obviously yours is sort of an evangelistic missionary trip, so it's maybe a
Hmm.
little more present and apparent, but yeah, we just wanted to catch back up and we'll sort of continue on with regular programming starting next week, but we just wanted to kind of dip our
Hmm.
toes back in the water.
Yeah, and is this technically season 2 of the Deuteronomy podcast?
That's a good question. Yeah, I've just done everything season one. So, I mean, this would be
Sure.
episode, is it
So
12, 11 or 12? I forget.
yeah.
But yeah, maybe that's how we can divide it.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, Kurt and I just want to catch everyone up with what we're up to and share a little bit of what God's doing in our lives. I think that's important. We want you guys to relate to us and know what we're up to and what our passions are. So I got the privilege in my job, my organization, to lead pretty much take normal people from all over the world, normal believers, I should say, over an assortment of denominations, and I kind of coordinate and can we alongside an African team that works in Africa long term and lives there. We try to converge everyone together as the body of Christ in a particular city for outreach. We do at least one of these a year. And so this year we were in Zambia. So there's a festival involved in it, and there's a lot of other, what we call it Ministry Week, which is the week leading up to the festival, where there's lots of different efforts to share the gospel in a lot of different contexts. So whether it's over a business and civic leaders, you gather a bunch of civic people, people that are the movers and the shakers of the city, and you're able to give them a good nice dinner and then share the gospel in that context, or share the gospel with police or the military. There's lots of different things and organizing people in groups where you can share the gospel. But I'm not in charge of all those. I participate in different ways, but my main thing is I'm a coordinator that hosts eyeglass and medical clinics around our main festival sites. So we see it varies on every trip between 7 to 12,000 people over a 4 day period in 4 different areas where we give them free screening. So they come, they get their eyes screened, and they can get free reading glasses. So that may sound very small to you. And when I first was offered the job, I'm like, is that really something that really creates an impact, And it actually does, because a lot of people in those areas of the world, like Africa and others, one, their eyesight goes bad faster based on, environmental conditions and being close to the equator and just the dry conditions that they experience. A lot of them lose their eyesight earlier on in life, so they need it if they need glasses, if they're going to do something with their hands, if they're going to crochet something, or maybe they have to do something to make money for their family, they need to be able to see. So we're able to do that and give lots of eyeglasses away. And if everything works out, we can actually have medical clinics alongside of those. So we bring doctors in from other parts of the world, as well as local doctors, to help screen people, as well as be translators. Most people do speak English, but yeah, so it's really rewarding to be able to do that and coordinate. I get my own driver who knows the ins and outs of the city, and so it's one of those things I've told multiple people. It's really rewarding to actually see the city. A lot of times you go on a mission trip and it's kind of like you go to one or two places, and yeah, you could say you've been there, but man, I've sat in traffic. I've inhaled all the different types of fumes that you see on these roadways and seen so many different things. It's humbling too, because you see every part of the city. You see the rich parts, you see the really, really poor parts, and it just makes you, appreciative of what you have. So, very quick summary of everything that I was involved in.
And that took place over how long?
Just a lot of that just happens over 1 week.
Okay. And
It's
you said
yeah.
7 to 12,000, and is that just in that clinic or that's at the festival?
That's all through all four clinics. So I usually oversee 4 clinics that happen at the same time. So we split up the team as well as train local people to screen people for eyeglasses. And so you have 4 clinics going on at the same time. And so throughout 4 days, you see anywhere between 7 to 12,000. A lot more people just come through. You can't help everyone, but can really address the problem that you're mainly focused on. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because if we look at the Gospels, that is something that Jesus did
Mm,
regardless of sort of where he was. People would line up for hours just to see him and be healed. And
right.
yeah, it's such a blessing. And you talked about, not being able to make a difference. I'm reminded of the allegory, and I'm going to get it wrong, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But,
Hmm.
there's a bunch of starships. There's a bunch of starfish washed up on the
Mm,
shore, and one guy he's throwing all these starfish in, and someone said, well, there's 10,000 starfish, like how are you, like, you're
mm.
not going to make a difference. And then he throws one and says, well, I'm making a difference to that one.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so that's what your story reminded me of, is Jesus,
Mm,
obviously, but you're making a difference in one person. And we've had chats at our home church in the last couple weeks about making a difference in one person's life, and how
mm.
that ripples out to other people. Like, hey, I was part of this program and I grew up and it really affected me, and now I want to be a teacher and I want to be in that program to help other
Sure.
people. So it's not even just a one to one. Sometimes it's a multiplying effect.
Hmm.
Like you said, being able to make a craft to be able to sell, to provide for your family. I mean,
Hmm.
that's not just one person you're providing better eyesight.
Right.
It's an entire family that now can eat because of what you were able to do. So yeah, I appreciate the perspective of, kind of going into it with skepticism, and yeah, but understanding that it's a lot more than meets the eye, no pun intended.
Hey, well done. That's good. Yeah.
We're named Dude-Eronomy. We got to come with the jokes sometimes.
Oh, it's well for sure. Yeah. But that I mean that's what I was doing, but you found yourself also going across large bodies of water and long plane flights. And where did you find yourself this summer?
Yeah, so we were really fortunate though. Our flight was straight from Portland to London, and we
Mm,
didn't have any stops in between. So that was pretty
hmm.
great. The reason my parents and I did this was because back in 2018, I finished my MBA, and I did an online MBA and finished it. And my parents gifted me a trip to England, and I've always wanted to go to England. I'm a huge soccer fan, and just I'm love history. And
Right,
my
right.
parents were like, "Okay, let's go. We'll go to London, and whatever other stuff you want to do." So COVID happens, obviously 2020, and this trip gets pushed off and delayed. So it's actually been it was 6 years in the making, this trip. So we
Oh,
finally did it, and yeah, it was quite an amazing experience. We sort of traversed all of England, like the northwest down to London in the southeast. We went to Paris. We went to out to Normandy Beach, and back. So there's a lot of moving around, and it was such an incredible trip. And I had several sort of run-ins with churches over there
hmm. Yeah.
in that part of the world, which was interesting. So one of the first days we were there, we went to the Churchill War Rooms, which is where
Mm,
Churchill sort of commanded the British response during World War II. And right around the corner from there is Big Ben. So obviously we were taking pictures there, and sort of right behind Big Ben is Westminster Abbey, which
mm.
I was thinking about this before we hopped on. I wonder if Westminster Abbey is like one of the most famous churches in the world outside of Italy,
Sure.
or outside of
Yeah.
Rome. I'm guessing it's probably one of the most famous churches in the world. But lots of huge events there. The funeral and wedding of Princess Diana, things like that. That we all remember or recognize. I mean, I guess I'm probably dating myself, saying that we all recognize those. From London, we went to Bath, which is an incredible city. If anyone has a chance to go there, it's quite the place.
Oh yeah.
It's like straight out of the like there's this little hospital. I don't even know if it's still a hospital, but it was like this building that was founded. I'd have to find the picture, but it's founded in like 1178 or something. It's
Oh.
like such an ancient city. It's incredible,
Wow.
and it has this abbey, and this abbey is from like the 1500s, and it's so old, and there's like, I think they said 4,000 people are buried there, and it's just this ornate relic from the Middle Ages, essentially. And the full day that we were there was a Wednesday, and on Wednesday is when they do their communion service.
Oh
The
yeah.
one day out of the week they do this communion service. So I was there for the communion service, which was pretty cool. It's an Anglican church, so a Church of England type of church. So it's like between Catholic and Protestant. It's a little more formal. The guy leading
Sure.
it is dressed up in
Particular,
priest,
yeah, robes.
yeah, robes. There you go. So we do that. And actually, I think we talked in one of our previous episodes about the different translations and how
Mm,
the MSG, the message translation, is sort of not something that we're big fans of. And the guy from the Anglican church who was leading this service, he preached one of the messages in the I think it was First Corinthians 13. He was talking about love, and he did it in the message version. And
mm,
I was like looking on my phone because he was like, "Oh, we're going to do a more traditional or a more modern version of this passage," and I was like, "Okay, well, what does that mean?" And it was not even close to like there's
mm.
so many words and phrases added that it's not even the same. And so I was a little disappointed in that, but it was really interesting. And again, as a history nerd, it was really cool to be in such a amazing setting, like just astonishing place, and to be
Sure.
able to enjoy communion there was really cool too. And there were lots of other people just from around the world. I met a lady from New York there, and so yeah, it's that was really cool. So then we went to Liverpool, Manchester, then we came back through London on the way to Paris. From Paris we went out towards Normandy, and we had a private tour guide lead us around some of the sites in Normandy where
That's great.
D-Day happened. And
Wow.
so we started at the American Cemetery, and the
Mm,
American Cemetery is actually laid out in a cross. So there's pathways around the outside, and there's a pathway through the middle, and then there's a cross path from side to side. So it's in the shape of a cross. And in the
mm.
middle of the cross, there's this chapel. Yeah, it's just a really profound, really poignant place to be to understand
Yeah.
sort of what happened there, and the sacrificial love that people 16 and 17-year-olds signed up to go in these boats and just back
Mm,
up right under German gunners and just get
yeah.
massacred essentially. So yeah, it was really profound. And one of the places that this tour guide took us was a church, and a lot of churches actually ended up getting bombed
Yeah.
during the US invasion. Essentially, it's
Hmm.
not an invasion, but they're trying to free it. They A lot of the places got bombed because the steeples could be sniper nest.
Oh
And
yeah.
so a lot of churches got bombed and then rebuilt afterward. But there was one church in particular, and there were two Americans that were 18-year-olds. They were medics, and they used this church as a central place of treating the wounded because they had benches that they could use as beds, and it
Right.
was sort of a central place they could operate. And they even treated several Germans that were, the Germans would be like, "Hey, we have injured people. Can we bring them?" And it was quite the scene. That church was untouched by the war. And still to this day, you can see blood stains in the benches.
Do.
You can see, and it's been like epoxy and stuff
Oh, sure.
to sort of, but
Capture
you
it.
can, yeah, but you can still see. And actually, I believe it was a German mortar, but the Germans, it may have been US, I'm not sure, but they actually fired a mortar at the church, and it came through the roof of the church, landed on the stone floor, and
Mm.
broke the stone, but the mortar didn't go off. And
Wow.
it was just, sort of providence for those guys who were, treating people. And you can see the hole in the roof that was patched up, and you can still see where the stone was broken from where that mortar came down. And so, yeah,
Sure.
just lots of really unique and interesting, little stories that
Yeah.
came out of that trip. And yeah, it was an amazing time. And then went back to Paris, back to London, and then back home. So yeah, what I was doing at the last
Mm.
part of summer, and yeah, just a lot of great memories with my parents, and went to an English football game and
Oh
got
yeah.
got kicked out. That's maybe a story for another day, but
Oh
um
man, that's a tease.
yeah, it was not fun. It was not, like I said, I'm a soccer nerd, a nut, and yeah, getting kicked out, that was not fun, but yeah, it happened, so yeah, I got to live with it, but well,
Well,
I'll have to
you'll have
go
a
over again.
well, yeah, and you'll have a great truth that you can tell, and two truths and a lie when you have to introduce yourself to a new set of people now. I
Yeah.
got kicked out
Yeah.
of a football game.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it was it was a great summer overall. You said you wanted to chat sort of about what God was speaking to you or trying to teach
Yeah.
you or sort of saying in your experiences, and like I said, I think maybe yours is a little more overt, because
Hmm.
it's sort of the things that you're dealing with in that field. But what sort of takeaways or lessons did you have from your time over there in Zambia?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. I think I'd love to hear what God's doing in your life too after this. I think as we're kind of transitioning from summertime to fall, so it's a good time to try new things and get new routines. I know I'm gonna start working out. Today was the first day of my new workout regime that I'm trying on. So, but yeah, I mean, God's working through me in my head as I'm a deep thinker, or at least I proclaim to be one.
Yeah,
Makes
that's a
me make.
dangerous claim. You gotta, you
It's
gotta.
true. It's true. I know. There's a couple asterisks there, but some things that God's been doing that's making me ponder deeply through everything that's happened this summer was, just the powerful nature of the body of Christ and what unity looks like to the outside world is, just the testimony of it, and obviously the spiritual gifts of everyone in the church coming together for one united purpose. I think there's something that we tend to be really divided by denominational lines, and for good reason in some ways. I mean, it's okay to differ on secondary and tertiary issues and in the body of Christ as a Christian, but to let it really make you stop talking to like another group of people that believe Jesus is Lord. What does that look like to the outside world when unity shows a lot of beautiful things come together when people come together for Christ? So God's been teaching me about that. I think just I'm at an eyeglass clinic and help getting medicine for that, and I'm just how important eyesight is to functioning and how little I care for my eyes. I mean,
Hmm.
I love doing yard work, and for years, instead of wearing goggles to protect my eyes when using a grinder or like a weed eater, I just simply squint and just use this contraption that's shooting rocks at my eyes at very high speeds. It's like how little I think about it, but you think about all the things you do with your eyes. I mean, most people have good eyesight, so they don't think about how important their eyes are, but that's just reality to me through this. Just continuing to try to do short-term missions without hurting. A lot of people from the West going over into different parts of the world, they go to do something, but a lot of times, whether it's not communicating cross culturally well or there's other issues, mission trips sometimes end up hurting, and a lot of money is wasted that could be put elsewhere. So, whenever I'm thinking and constructing a mission trip, I'm also always thinking about, trying to avoid the hero mentality. We want to give the locals the ability to grow and learn on their own as well as learn from them. We're not just the givers of knowledge, but we're also the receivers. But we want them to blossom. If we're going over there to provide a service, it should be something that they can, reproducible, that they can do and grow. So providing training and letting the locals shine rather than simply doing everything yourself as the visitor. So just always trying to tweak things here or there on these trips, make sure that when money's used, it's obviously a resource that God provides, so we want to be the best stewards of that. And then the final thing is, with any mission trip, there's more than just the person going on the mission trip. I kind of alluded it to the last point. There's the people that receive us in the host country. There's the person that goes on the mission trip, and then likely, in most contexts, there's the giver, the person who gives to the person if they fundraised. Most people just give money or they fundraise, and so you have the people that are giving too. So how can you put all these things together and grow everyone? You want everyone in all those three people, the giver, the goer, and the host that's receiving you, to grow in their relationship with Christ through it all. So just thinking about all those things and trying to be better. We should be not perfectionists, but God's called us to do beautiful work, and so we want to be doing things with excellence, right? So those are kind of where my mind is at. I don't know if you have any questions about that, but if not, I'd love to hear what God's doing in your life going into fall.
Yeah, those are really great. I think of, Jesus teaching his disciples to be fishers of men. I think that's really important also. I mean, especially in the West, I think we have a tendency to and I think it's easy. I'm not saying it's hard to avoid, but we've
Right.
often sometimes fall into the trap of being having the white savior complex,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that's very real. And again, it's not. I'm not saying it's easy to avoid, but it's something that you have to be able to grapple with because
Yeah.
you're in a different culture that maybe. I'm reminded actually. I had a friend who was working for a nonprofit, and they had a village where they essentially took in orphans, and they had like 10 different homes,
Hmm.
and there'd be like a mother and a father, like a couple. They'd be a couple, and they would care for like 6 to 8 children, so
Wow.
orphans. So on this village, and then they had like agriculture and all these different things to make it a sustainable village, so the kids would grow up well. And there was a donor who wanted to donate ovens to the village for each of the houses,
Oh yeah.
and they were like, well, we don't have the electricity for it. We don't have like they cook
Right.
in this traditional way, and they don't like they use wood and fire. And
Hmm.
yeah, so that just kind of sprung to mind
Yeah.
thinking about those different things that, while it's intended well, it's often, there's
Hmm.
cultural bridges that need to be, you look at it through a different lens because it's not our Western lens. Culturally, it just doesn't make sense, or even, logistically with things like electricity and stuff. It's just not always
Right.
feasible. But yeah, so I would say as far as my summer, what things looked like. Yeah, I think it was a really, really great summer. That trip just sort of, further enforced, the love I have for my parents, honestly.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, my parents are wonderful people, and they're so selfless. And Lord knows, as a young man, I put them through a lot. So yeah, and one of the most rewarding things about sort of growing up and leaving the house is that my sister and I played soccer all the time. So, and I tell people that soccer was our family religion, and my sister was
Nice.
going one place and I was going another, and my dad was taking me somewhere and my mom was taking my sister somewhere, or flying to see my sister play in college somewhere. My parents were so us focused that, when we finally left the house, and seeing my parents being able to take trips, like going to Hawaii or going to Mexico with friends, or that was like my most favorite thing about moving out, was seeing that my
Mm.
parents were able to sort of have fun for themselves and not have to be sort of our chaperones and our taxi service. And
Sure.
that, what I experienced on this trip is because I haven't really traveled with them since I was a kid. And so yeah, just to see the nature of my parents and how loving they are and supportive. And yeah, still lots of things I could say, but I'm gonna leave a little vague. But
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
lots of growth on this trip for sure. And
Sure.
um, yeah, so it really was a wonderful experience, and definitely saw God moving through it. And
Good.
it was a great couple weeks, and then obviously we're heading into the fall here, and I could not be more excited. I love the fall. I'm a true Northwest
Yeah.
kid. I love the rain,
Yep.
and yeah, so that's me. I love, you know, cuddling under a blanket and watching stuff. I have a friend whose favorite TV show is Seinfeld,
Oh.
and I haven't seen 1 second of Seinfeld. Like I've maybe seen clips and stuff on YouTube, but that's
Oh
gonna be
wow.
my guilty pleasure over the next, however long it takes. So, and I gotta sign up for
Wow.
Netflix now because they like lock you out of sharing passwords with people. So yeah, I gotta do that. But
Wow.
yeah, so I'm excited for the cold, rainy weather. Football's here. That'll always be my fall time companion. Uh,
Absolutely. I'm the same way, and we hope you as your listener are able to enjoy yourself while you're reading this or while you're listening to this in the fall. And we're thankful for your listening, and yeah, we're excited to talk about some really cool stuff, some spiritual topics in the next few weeks. So we're ready.
yeah, we got topics coming your way, and it's going to be interesting because we're going to get into the sort of the crux of things that most people try to avoid.
Hmm.
Francis Chan called it the forgotten God, and we're gonna dive right into it. That's gonna kind of kick off our second season, if you will. So stay tuned. We're gonna be coming at you in the next couple weeks with some more Christian topics, and yeah, I think we're really gonna enjoy it.
I know I will, and I hope you guys do. And yeah, thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See you guys. Thanks for listening to the Dude-Eronomy podcast. If you want a question answered or have a topic for an upcoming show, email us at dudeeronomypod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at dude_eronomy. And we'll catch you next week.